Welcome to Harbinger's flagship interactive webinar, Power Hour. Select the right speaker for audio output. Test your speaker from audio settings. If necessary, join the webinar using your phone. Use the Q&A panel to share your questions. This webinar is being recorded. Attendees will receive the recording. Let's tune in.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for taking the time to join in for this interactive conversation. Today, we are going to talk about how we can leverage AI to enhance frontline workforce development. In terms of introduction, my name's Rahul. I represent Harbinger Group, and I'm passionate about implementing e-learning solutions for workforce development. And I have a couple of industry experts as panelists with me. So let me welcome, first of all, let me welcome Emily. Good morning, Emily. Thank you very much for taking the time out for this conversation and joining us over here to share your experiences and insights. So thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
And the other panelist that we have is Geoffrey. Geoffrey, once again, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to have this conversation and to share your insights with the L&D community today.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you. So what are we going to talk about today? What's our game plan? So I think firstly, we will explore that how AI can power a scalable ecosystem for frontline workforce development. We'll also try and understand that how an AI-enabled virtual coach can deliver learning in the flow of work at the point of need. We'll try and discover with the panelists what it takes to foster a culture of continuous learning, because in the current landscape and the way the technology is shifting, on a daily basis, if I'm not exaggerating it. So, how do we ensure the continuous learning? And then gain insights into how continuous performance management connects learning initiatives to business outcomes. Because I think fundamentally, we'll hear more on this from the panelists, but we can see that the lines between talent management and workforce development have kind of started blurring. Like, the talent management and the L&D are no longer working in silos. There's quite a lot of overlap happening over there. So we'll touch upon that aspect as well. Now, why are we talking about this today? Like, of course, I mean, it's a no-brainer that the frontline workforce development is the need of the hour. These are purely some stats from different sources on the web, which talks about why is it important? Why are we talking about this today? I mean, the first one was it's about frontline managers struggling. There are twofold things. One is that, staffing gaps, and then, the performance issues. Both of them are there. I think in healthcare, a major portion of organizations say that, it's required in terms of to deliver a competitive age. And there are multiple sub-segments in transportation, like, the web says that over 14 million workers are part of logistics-related sectors, and that's the supply chain to the customer service. So that's where it's important. But yeah, I mean, we'll not kind of spend too much time on statistics or something that we all of us know and acknowledge and agree. So we'll move ahead with this. So with that, I would request Emily, if you could please tell us a little bit about yourself and why this topic is of interest to you.
Absolutely. So I'm Emily Dixon, and I'm the head of global learning at Hertz. And I've always been passionate about developing people and how we can make that kind of culture fun and exciting and engaging. And another thing I'm equally passionate about is how we embrace innovative technology to help us do that more effectively and efficiently, and in ways that, even a few years ago, we couldn't even imagine. And so I'm so excited to be here and talk about this topic, and it really has been a game changer at Hertz. And I think we're only at the very front end of it. And there's so many more things I want to do and see. And so excited to also hear from attendees today and from Geoffrey about how other places are implementing it and really focused on the frontline workforce in particular. At Hertz, the vast majority of our employee population they're frontline employees, and they are critical to everything we do, especially to providing, safe and efficient and hopefully exceptional customer service. And so, as the head of global learning, my focus is always how do we equip these employees and these teams with the knowledge they need and the skills they need when they need it. So, like I said, I could geek out on this all day. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Emily. And we are also excited to have you on this panel. And I think a couple of interesting things that you mentioned is about embracing innovative technology. So I think as L&D leaders, that's one piece which is very important. And then empowering people, like, the core function, like, technology is just an enabler, but the primary focus that you mentioned is empowering people, making sure they get what they are looking for, so that they can, do well, perform better, grow in their careers. So we are all excited to hear about the, wonderful, innovative applications of technology that you have implemented at Hertz. So yeah, and with that, Geoffrey, I would request you to please tell us a little bit about yourself. And you are a pretty prominent face when it comes to healthcare workforce development. So uh, I know this topic is very close to your heart, but still, for the format of the discussion, I will ask you, like, why is this topic of interest to you?
Sure. Yeah, and Raiola, thank you so much, for the opportunity, and obviously, consider it a privilege to be on a panel with someone like Emily, who's doing this incredible work and leading it globally. Obviously, many people will know from the work that I did at Siemens, which I recently transitioned out of, where I had the opportunity to lead workforce development in the US and Canada, and then obviously influence the global workforce development ecosystem across the globe. And I think for me, this has always been a topic of great interest because in many ways it was the exact life story of what brought me into healthcare. I'm the son of a nurse who went to school when I was 5. She achieved her degree as an associate degree nurse as a single mom with a support system that allowed her to, become a great story of career and economic mobility. And when I look at that example of that, what then brought me into healthcare, obviously I've never actually been an L&D practitioner. I've always been a leader within the organization that's partnered with L&D. And what I've always realized is that L&D really needs support to further scale in healthcare. And it really requires a very different approach. And so why this topic makes me of interest is a couple of things. I think we've got to help scale, and we have to be able to scale effectively. And I think AI has a great opportunity to scale. I also think it has a great opportunity to make learning fun, again, creative, engaging. It has ways to allow our professionals to be the best that they can be, so that they can be focused on the elements that are so critical in healthcare. Probably the other point that for me has me excited is if we leverage it right, I also think it allows us to get back to some of the most important aspects in healthcare, which is really dignity, human-centered care, really focusing on our communication, really focusing on empathy. Things that, unfortunately, in healthcare, we've lost a lot of in the last several years, and we just continue to, both societally, but also especially in the healthcare industry. And so for me, this is life-changing work. And let me just say, I spent yesterday all day at a healthcare system meeting apprentices, youth apprentices, and apprenticeship degree students. And it was in UW Health Madison. And it was a great reminder for me of why this work is so important, because each of them shared a story of what that work, that opportunity is doing for them, their life, their community, and ultimately their family. And that to me is I consider it a privilege every day to do this work.
So much, Geoffrey. That's quite a inspiring story that you just mentioned. And I think a couple of very interesting points that you brought in is like, at one part of the side, we are saying that, we can leverage technology to make it scalable. And definitely, I think probably everyone, most of us would agree to this fact that yes, we can really leverage this technology, generative AI, and scale up things. And the other interesting aspect that you mentioned is the human-centered approach. And probably if time permits today in today's conversation, we'll try and get some insights from you in terms of why do you feel that, in the healthcare space, that part has, gone out a little bit. Is it, are there some things to watch out for? But very interesting. And thank you once again for joining us for this conversation. And from the audience perspective, as Emily requested, we would love to hear stories from you as well. At any point of time, if there is any thought or question that comes up in your mind, please put it in the chat box. We'll have our panelists, respond to you. And if you want to share a story, please feel free to do that. Just type in the chat box, and then, we can see if we can unmute our attendees and, get the stories going. So yeah, let's kind of dive deeper into this topic. So yeah, coming back to you, Geoffrey, so firstly, kind of for the context, for the audience reference, just give us a little bit of idea in terms of what Risepoint is, and what are your plans, to leverage AI to support frontline workforce development, or things which are already being done, or, your vision around it. So if you could just share some thoughts around that, please.
Sure. Yeah, so obviously, Risepoint is a private equity-backed ed tech company that has the privilege of working with, private, public colleges and universities around the country to support all aspects of workforce development for employers. And so but my major focus is in nursing. And so really helping to lead the work that develops our future nurses, supports our current healthcare professionals to become nurses. So when I think about, AI and ways that we're leveraging it, I mean, we're bringing it into the curriculum for sure. We're leveraging it actually to also help the faculty, the clinical faculty. There's a huge clinical faculty shortage in all aspects of the health professions in the United States. And so whatever we can do to help them focus on teaching, focus on mentoring, coaching, supporting the students to ultimately achieve their degrees and pass their licenses is critical. We're also, though, really, collaborating with hospitals and healthcare systems to envision how you leverage AI around different experiences, such as the clinical simulation experience, the skills labs experiences. We have to really, to Emily's point, think about how you harness the power of the technology. Certainly you have to lead it and create it in a way that's going to support your needs. But I think for me, it always in this space comes down to efficiency. So when I think about frontline workforce development in healthcare, if we're successful with it, we should reduce burnout. We should create more value in the system. Not more finances necessarily for the healthcare system, but that's a benefit too, but actually more value for the entire continuum of the workforce. So instead of having to, click, click, click in an electronic health record, or look through documentation, or, spend minutes to hours to literally order workflows in a healthcare system for procedures or for whatever the case may be, we should be harnessing it to assist in that way, because ultimately that makes the work better. I think in healthcare, I always say, we always have to think about how we're working smarter rather than working harder, because we know it's inevitably a very tough industry to be in. And far too often, we're still working so hard to achieve what really should be something much easier if we're harnessing the power of things like AI. And the final point I would just make is, when I think about the front line, I'm thinking about our allied health professionals, whether you're a medical assistant or patient care tech, certainly our nurses and all those folks. When we think about the day in the life of those individuals, we have to remember the most important piece for each of them are really patient interactions. How they treat a patient could be a make it or break it moment for that patient. In healthcare, we have to remember everyone comes into healthcare with various needs, various challenges. They may be coming in to celebrate the birth, or they may be coming in to prepare for the death of a loved one. And if we can harness AI to support that human dignity, that human connection, that human kindness, allow our front line to do what they do best, allow them to smile, allow them to bring joy back into the workplace. Imagine what your healthcare experience can be like. And so that's some of the examples I would share.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey. I mean, I think you've brought in a very interesting perspective that, at one point of things, you are saying that, helping clinical faculties do more, which is kind of, talked about pretty much in the edtech domain, wherein, instead of they investing their time in doing mundane and admin activities, if they can spend more time, teaching, interacting with students, focusing on mentoring and all. But I think this is something, this gives me a very fresh perspective. The point that you mentioned about patient interactions. Now, if I recall that all of us visit healthcare systems, and then, of course, there is an experience that we get. There could be different reasons why we are there in the healthcare system, but those experiences really matter. And the human dignity, the empathy part is something very important, and it actually makes or breaks the day for the patient, or for that matter, even sometimes it leaves scars for months and years on the patients and their relatives. So that's one very interesting point that you mentioned. And reducing the burnout part that you mentioned, I think that's also interesting. Like, literally, of course, if in relative terms, healthcare workforce is, kind of literally stacked up with a lot of work. But I think, Emily, we would agree that even at Hertz, or for that matter, any other frontline workforce development, burnout is kind of a challenge. So maybe I'll leave this question with you, Geoffrey, for now. Later, we can kind of, because this is of interest, like, how can we leverage AI to reduce burnout? So we'll come back to this point later. And now we'll move ahead in the conversation. And before I request Emily to share her thoughts, we'll do a quick audience poll. So in the audience, and you can just type in a yes, or just do a thumbs up with the icons that we have here on the Zoom meeting. How many of us have used Hertz services in the past? Okay, we've got one response.
We've got some work to do.
All right. So yeah, lots of times. Yeah, it's coming up now. Yeah, right. All right. So, for me, it's always a very surreal experience. Like, a product that you had been using, or your parents had been using, you had experienced them since childhood, and then you meet the people behind that product or service. That's very interesting. So the reason I asked this question is, when you hear Emily's thoughts, relive your experiences that you have had with Hertz. And I've always had fantastic experience. So some of those experiences could be attributed to the initiatives that Hertz has launched under Emily's leadership. So yeah, Emily, I mean, it's the floor is yours. If you can just tell us a little bit about, in terms of, what you have been doing at Hertz, and how you are leveraging AI to help your frontline teams do well in their jobs and in their life overall.
Absolutely. Well, and it's hard to follow Geoffrey, right? It's funny, as you were talking, I was thinking how whenever someone on my team is, stressed out about something, I always say, Geoffrey, I say, we're not saving lives, we're renting cars. It's going to be okay. But you don't have the luxury of saying that. So it's a hard act to follow. But I do want to kind of touch on three main areas that we have had success at Hertz in utilizing AI to develop our frontline workforce. And the first of those is really around kind of real-time access to knowledge. So historically, at Hertz, right, we're a 100-plus-year-old company, and especially in the last decade, have just been through a lot and had to evolve as a business, and we as a learning department have had to evolve with it. And historically, one of our challenges was that it turns out renting cars isn't as easy as one would think. There are many things that go on behind the scenes. And so we've had to train our employees on a wide range of kind of processes and topics up front. And even though they won't encounter these situations often for months. And so AI has allowed us to kind of completely rethink that approach. And we have a fabulous tech and product team. And so we've actually introduced an employee app that puts AI powered support in the palm of all of our employees' hands. So that's how we all learn, right? When I'm in the kitchen trying to remember how my memo taught me how to make something, I don't have to pull it out of the back of my brain. I can just, ask ChatGPT. And so that's what our workforce is used to. And so we have used this employee app and other tools to really, instead of, you know, relying on our employees to memorize information, to teach them how to use these tools to find the answers instantly. So, for example, if we have a car cleaner who finds a weapon in a vehicle, which is a rare but obviously a serious situation, they don't have to remember all the steps they need to take. They just can ask the app, like, hey, I just found a weapon. What do I do? And it will tell them the correct protocol to follow. So it's kind of a shift from like just in case learning to real time learning. And it's been a real game changer. The other area I want to mention is really how AI has powered learning for our frontline in terms of personalized training. And so there are several ways in which it has helped. And I think um, just a couple of the most, I think, impressive examples is one would be safety. And safety is a non-negotiable. And so we're currently leveraging AI technology in our mobilized fleet unit. And so it's monitoring driving patterns and flagging risks and then providing targeted micro learnings to our team. So if it detects a pattern of hard braking, the system can automatically assign a refresher on defensive driving. So it's really been fun to see kind of what we can do with that, and what would have been a much more manual process in the past to provide that level of targeted learning has become much easier. And another example of personalized learning that is one of my favorites is around skills and skills assessments. And so we've developed an AI-powered skills assessment tool that lets us measure the level of skill within certain competencies and then provide really customized learning paths based on that. So it makes it more relevant and targeted and impactful. And it helps us shift from kind of a one size fits all training to more adaptive and learner centric models. And I think, when you talk about your frontline workforce, right? Any time away from the operation, time away from the counter, time away from the lot, there's a cost to that. And so we want to make sure that that time is the most impactful it can be, down to an individual level. And AI has really made that possible. And then, the last area I want to mention is really around immersive learning and learner feedback in real time. And one of our challenges has always been, how do we, as an L&D organization, deliver truly immersive learning at scale, given our dispersed workforce? And, that's not easy if you don't have a ton of resources and a ton of budget. And so the AI tools that we've been able to implement, that are these simulators that act like a virtual coach, have really been impactful. And they essentially present you with, a challenging workplace scenario and then respond in real time and provide adaptive feedback based on the learner inputs. And I think for our frontline employees, it helps them build confidence and essentially decision-making skills in a safe environment, which is just incredible to watch. And I know I said I was only going to mention 3 areas, but since I have the mic, I would be remiss not to kind of touch on the point again of just organizational efficiencies that Geoffrey mentioned. And, no one in learning development or any area, I would assume, has unlimited budget or resources. And so we have to embrace technologies like AI to to make us work more efficiently, which will allow us to be more strategic and innovative so that we can focus more on behaviors and skills, and the rest is kind of at their fingertips. And in our organization, we've obviously found ways to automate routine tasks, but from a content development standpoint, it's been really AI has supported it in powerful ways, including storyboarding video concepts or generating scenario-based questions, narration, which can be done in any language, translation. So it just goes on. And I think every day I feel like I learn something new, and I'm like, oh, we should try that. So it's a really exciting space to kind of play in. And I think it will ultimately change the way we look at learning, regardless of what industry we're in.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing these insights. I mean, these are all very interesting aspects. So I think I think one of the things that I would like to bring to the attention of the audience is that, whenever we talk about, oh, you know what, we'll build an app and we'll launch training program for employees on that. So there's always been a little bit of pushback in the sense that, oh no, another app. What about the user adoption? Will it happen or not? So here is a live example of user adoption at scale. We're talking about an organization which has got, distributed workforce across the US. So if it adds value, I think people will adopt the new technology or download another app on their phone. I think one of the important aspects, the other important aspect that you mentioned is personalized learning and, kind of flagging out the driving skills. So there's a shout out to some of the other taxi and cab aggregators. If you get to listen to this, it's a great thing, because otherwise it becomes very subjective, right? Like, the user who has had an experience will, give some kind of rating. The other one would give some kind of rating. AI powered skills assessments, that was interesting. Emily, just one question is, like, before you had launched this AI app, and what I understand is you have created a knowledge base, and on top of that, there is a layer of AI which gets that real-time information to the employees when they're in the need of information, or in their flow of work. Prior to this, how was this done? Was it done in classroom trainings? Were there SOPs, PDF manuals, etc.?
All of the above, Rahul. It was all of the above. So that was kind of what I touched on earlier about the need, from a liability standpoint and just a knowledge standpoint. We had to cover so much up front in new hire training, because these employees aren't at a computer. So while we have SOPs and we have standard work, and we have all of those knowledge bases, and have over the years made those as easy to navigate and access as possible, they didn't have access to them. If they're out in the field, if they're working on a car in a maintenance bay, or they're driving a car around the lot to make sure the right car is in the right place at the right time, or they're talking to a customer. They have their screen in front of them, but that has the rental system. And so this app really allowed them to access it regardless of where they were within the operation. And I think I was worried, right? Because we have a very diverse workforce generationally. And so in the past, we have gotten some pushback and had challenges with adoption from a technology standpoint. I think ultimately it comes down to what any change requires, which is, to get buy-in, you have to say what's in it for them, and how this is going to make their lives easier. And ultimately, we saw less pushback than I thought we would. And I think that goes back to just how, regardless of generation, we all really have gotten so used to having technology or having knowledge at our fingertips. And so it wasn't as hard of a shift from a buy-in standpoint, honestly, as I thought it would be.
That's interesting. So yeah, I just wanted to bring up this point for attention, is because one of the things that comes up is, like, what about the adoption, and how is it happen? Is it going to be safe? Is it going to be ethical? But
Mhm.
you can customize it, make it a safe environment, tune it train the model to act as per your organization's guidelines, standards, and policies. And yeah, and the one more point that you mentioned was that was also interesting for me is that, and again, I would like to bring this to the attention for the audience by reiterating on this, is that, for the immersive learning part, I mean, typically, like most of us, or at least myself, we focus on, on the product, like, how the e-learning program should be created or how the classroom training program should be delivered to make it an immersive learning experience. And of course, there is a feedback mechanism like survey, or you can fill in forms and give your feedback. But what to do with that feedback? So I think with AI, I think one of the important aspects that we could do is like collect that feedback, make sense out of it, get insights from it, and then suggest that, all right, we need to make certain changes in the way we deliver learning programs or training programs. So thank you for bringing that point up. That's very interesting. And we will move ahead in the conversation. So we'll just spend, I'll just share some stories that we have done at Harbinger in terms of how we have leveraged AI-enabled frameworks for frontline workforce development. And so fundamentally, it starts with either you call the skills taxonomy or the competency matrix. For example, based on different job roles, what are the basic skills that that person should have. And it's not a very complex mechanism. I think to begin with one of the customers that we did this was, it was purely Excel. No, innovative technology, just used in XLS to map the learning content with different competencies and create the personalized learning pathway. Now we can leverage AI to do it at much larger scale and at a much faster speed. Once the competency matrix is in place, then, the skill gap analysis and the point, Emily, that you were mentioning. So we bring in AI and we say that, all right, here's the performance data of this individual. And you can, feed in the performance data that you want, like, from the HRIS systems or, one-on-one with managers and annual appraisals and all those kind of things. And then you make the AI, analyze the performance data versus the competency matrix. And based on that, you publish a skill gap analysis report for an individual. And of course, there's a layer of human check on it. And based on that skill gap analysis, you recommend like customized learning pathways for learners. And then once the customized learning pathways are done, then you implement an AI-enabled chatbot or a virtual coach, or like the employee app that Emily was mentioning. You can bring in an intervention that is there with the learner continuously 24/7. So they don't have to be dependent on anyone. They'll get the information when they're in the need of work, flow of work. And then you continuously close the loop by evaluating. So going back and evaluating, like, after you have rolled out this program, let's say you have, given a time period of 6 months to improve the performance. So whether that performance has improved or not, you evaluate that and get it fixed. Now, this is at a framework level. And now I'll tell you an actual customer story that how we implemented this. So we were working with a, a hot dog retail chain in US. They have around 330 outlets in US. And their business challenge was their drive-through counter sales were going down. And at the same time, their customer experience rating was going down. And, when the analysis was done, fundamentally, it was found that there's not enough time that we get to train these people. And, they're at counters, like Emily mentioned, like, they have to be at the counters. They don't have a desk job so that they can open their laptops and consume training and all those kind of things. And all the information was in place, but all the standard operating procedures, how to upsell, how to kind of deal with the customers, the what are the values that we have to deliver to the customer. All those standard operating procedures, guidelines, documents were there, but they were sitting behind a SharePoint server. And when you're at the counter, or you are interacting with the customer, or you're in the middle of creating making a hot dog, you don't have the time to go back, log in into your SharePoint, pull out the relevant PDF, and then scroll through that PDF or do a control F and find the relevant information that you're looking for. That's too much time. So what was done was actually all that information was fed into an AI enabled virtual coach. It's basically an AI chatbot, which was made intelligent with that level of information, and it had text and speech capabilities. So, you could just interact with that chatbot at the moment of the need and get the relevant information that was sitting in the PDFs. And this is something I think uh, and it delivered results. Like, we were told, like, after 6 months, when the evaluation was done, when the loop was closed and the data was looked upon, the customer service ratings had increased by 1% positive, and the drive-through counter sales had increased by 5%. And we were told that, in quick service restaurant chain business, those numbers were good enough numbers in terms of improvement. So, and over a period of time, what we have seen this is literally every organization, or most of the organizations, mid-size or large-size organizations, they have a lot of content, sitting in multiple LMSs, behind SharePoints, behind firewalls. There's no dearth of resources. They have access to LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, and all those type of, skilling platforms and all those things. But I think there's a little bit of overwhelming experience for the learners as well. It happens when there's just too much to look into and figure out what works best for me. But by leveraging AI, we can narrow down the scope and make it easy for the learner, make it engaging. Like, for example, safety training, compliance training, these kind of things. Like, sure, it still happens this way, but at least till couple of years back, it would happen as, there's a compliance training. It's a mandate for every employee to do. So you'll get those reminder emails. And every time you look at those reminder emails to complete the compliance training, you'll feel that, all right, how do I figure out those 30-minute slots where I could complete this checkbox and, download the certificate and send it to my department and say that, I've done this. So, because, as humans, we feel that's a little bit intrusive. But by implementing AI-enabled chatbots, and we have implemented the nudge mechanism. So without being intrusive, the chatbot starts interacting. Like some of the associations we have worked with in terms of member engagement and education, is that if the organization allows, they'll have access to your Outlook, so they can look at your schedule, they can look at your learning pathway, and they say that, what, looks like, these learning programs are pending and you need to kind of complete them. Do you want me to look up on your Outlook and see if I can, block some time on your calendar for this type of stuff? So the person is like, all right, okay, I've got an assistant, like an AI-based assistant who's helping me do this. And then those kind of nudging mechanisms, all those kind of things that we have implemented. So yeah, I mean, this is something which is not very complex. And one other thing that I would like to say, it's not necessary to implement the entire thing. For example, the starting point is not the competency matrix. For example, if it's too cumbersome, too complex to build the competency matrix, if an organization does not have the competency matrix, I mean, the use case that Emily just mentioned is that, create an AI-enabled mentor, coach, chatbot, which has that knowledge and information gathered and is trained on your organization's policies, standards, guidelines, and can help the learner in the flow of work. So again, anyone in audience, if you have, or if you want to share your experience in terms of if you have implemented anything like this to bring learning in the flow of work for workforce development, please type in the chat and we'll unmute you and, hear from you about your experiences. And I'll keep looking at the chat. If anyone wants to share, we'll unmute you. Otherwise, we'll move ahead in the discussion. So, and this question is both for you, Emily and Geoffrey, and probably we'll start with you, Geoffrey, is that I think, I mean, very interestingly, some big consulting firm recently published an article. I don't know, I don't want to kind of call out a wrong name, but it's there on the web. I don't remember the name of that consulting firm. Was it Forbes or Workforce Economic Forum? It said that 85% of the initiatives, AI-led initiatives at enterprises, have not delivered on the ROI. So, and that's not a disheartening news. Like, if I look from my perspective, that's not a disheartening news. The good news is that, people are open to adopt new innovation technology. But I think all of us, when we are doing something new, there are some roadblocks, there are some hurdles, there are some challenges. So that's why I wanted to bring up this question because, both you, Emily, and Geoffrey, you have experienced some of this, you have done some of this in your organizations. So what were the typical challenges that you faced? What are the red flags that you will call out we should look out for at the start? And if any tips and tricks in terms of how did you overcome them? So Geoffrey, we'll start with you.
Yeah. I think, and Emily obviously alluded to some of this, particularly I think when she was speaking about it from how I understood it. I think anytime, right, you're going to look at any new innovation or any new technology, you obviously have to think about, the fact that some people may be resistant to change. And so I think you always have to have a change management type of philosophy. And you have to do it with what I would consider empathetic understanding, because some people will come at it not to be negative to the change, but just want to know if it's actually going to be a positive or want to know that it's actually going to make their job better. And they're going to want to know if it's going to eliminate their job, right? Because there's been so much written, said about that exact case. I think in many cases, we've realized that there's more augmentation here than actually replacing, but there are some areas, for example, that we do need to be honest about. The other point I would certainly make is what I have seen in this space, and I still believe it very strongly, especially in the healthcare space, is one of the reasons why we don't see things continue to not be a success is because we roll this out without ever actually asking the end user for their input on it. It's the same thing we've had with EHRs. It's often actually some of the things we actually get even in the L&D profession. Yes, we're expertise, but let's ask our stakeholders what they actually want. And let's ask them how they believe it could be useful or impactful to the work that they do. I can't stress that piece enough. I think we have to really give an opportunity, particularly when you got 5 different generations in the workplace. I think about how dynamic and different each of us are. As a millennial, how I want to learn or how I want to see something implemented could be very different than a boomer or a Gen Xer, Gen Y, etc. And I think just taking that extra time to ask people for their input can really make a difference when it comes to the adoption. The final point I would make is you have to be inclusive and transparent throughout it. Communication has to be regular. So anytime we're going to talk about whatever, if it's a project related to AI or it's a project related to a new product and innovation, etc., there's got to be constant communication. And it can't just be one-sided communication. There has to be an opportunity for every stakeholder to feel that they have that moment to be heard, to feel like they can contribute. I regularly believe that if we can co-develop a solution and engage our stakeholders, that adoption number will go up. When I saw that exact report that you're speaking about, my exact reference of how I evaluated that line was it was probably a top-down approach. Far too often, that's the case. In my view, when we're talking about AI, and especially in this case, workforce development, we're democratizing the learning and the education. So we actually need to do a more bottom-up approach and allow those at all of those front lines to actually feel like they created and give them the moment to feel like they're a part of the actual solution. I'll make this comment because it just reminds me so much. I will never forget my time in hospital administration, where one of my senior vice presidents, who was one of the best leaders I ever worked for, had a program he called Fresh Eyes. And Fresh Eyes was a program where we would walk around the hospital, both clinical, non-clinical leaders, and our only job was to stop and talk to as many of our frontline staff as possible and ask them a couple core questions. One was, how's your day? Second was, if there was one thing we could do to help you today to make your job and your experience better, what would it be? And 3, if there was something you would want to change about the area you're working in, maybe a short term, medium term, long term, what would you offer? And what could we do to help make it happen? And that just small initiative led to some of the most expansive projects that we as a healthcare system ever were part of. We redid our emergency room. We launched a children's ED. We did it all with the input of these team members. And the best part of it was when we got to break the ribbon, cut the ribbon for all these, it was that frontline team who contributed to the actual idea that got to cut it along with our leadership. That went such a far, long way to really build that trust and that authentic relationship that many of them want to have with leadership, where you started to really see frontline actually be the idea generators for solutions. That's what I think has to happen here.
Wonderful. This is really very interesting. I think the point that you mentioned about co-develop and get a buy-in from the stakeholders, like their point of view as to how the product should be, or whatever we are implementing, how it will help. I think there are some things which still works cross-generational, I think, across generations. And I think my point of view says that, one of those things is what's in it for me. Like if you're doing something, like what's in it for me. So I think communicating that message clearly, that this is about empowering them, getting their point of view. And I think just those small interactions, and those were like, those interactions that Geoffrey mentioned, they would have happened before AI. Now there's AI to achieve that. For example, even if you have like let's say a 5,000 workforce development need, you can actually listen to the voice of each and every individual, gather that information, and make those subtle changes right from, and we are not just talking about, I think Geoffrey was not just talking about the learning part, it's for the overall employee experience part that you're giving. And eventually those employees will deliver, the brand promise and the brand experience to their customers, whichever industry they're working in. So co-developing, having a bottom to top approach, these are the two key takeaways that Geoffrey, I took from your thoughts. So with that, I'll request Emily, if you can kind of share your thoughts and on this particular question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Geoffrey, you hit the nail on the head, right? I think regardless of if we're talking about implementing AI technology or a learning program or any initiative within any industry or business, if you don't take that bottom up approach, you're going to miss the mark. And we see this time and again. And I think about actually one of our most successful learning programs, which is Leadership Evolution. And it's this program that really, from the beginning, was the operators were shaping it. And because we know what we know, right? We know L&D, and we think we know how it should be structured for the best learner experience. But I'll tell you what, I'm it just, every time I go into a room with the audience that will be the actual learners, there is something that I end up changing because of the feedback that they give. And that's applicable to anything we do. And so ultimately, I think your question is really not even specific to AI and to how we use technology to empower our workforce. It's just, it's change management, and it's making sure that the right people are in the room, so that not only what you are delivering, regardless of what it is impactful and relevant and resonates with the audience, but you will get that buy-in alongside of that. And that is critical in everything we do.
Thank you, Emily. I think for the audience, like you've heard it from both Geoffrey and Emily, and I think there's a concurrence there in terms of the stakeholder buy-in. I think as L&D leaders, most of us had been talking about this always, that we have to get the learner buy-in, the stakeholder buy-in. I think the question that we could ask ourselves is how effectively and efficiently we have been able to do that. And the reasons could be multiple. there was no way to scale that kind of information, or go to that particular scale or achieve that. But I think now, we can leverage the technology to get there and move ahead. So relevance, impactful, these are some of the key takeaways, Emily, that I took uh, from your point of view. Is definitely, if someone tells me that, why don't you do this course on Udemy, yeah, if it's gonna impact what I do in my day-to-day job, if it's relevant to my persona interest areas, then definitely that will get me excited. And if the learner is motivated and excited, I used the wrong word. If the motivated and excited about the relevance of the topic and the impact of the topic and the interest of the topic, would you agree to the fact that then it really doesn't matter if it's a PDF or you know, e-learning, a gamified e-learning program with a lot of bells and whistles? Would you agree, disagree to that?
I mostly agree with that. I'm always going to go for the bells and whistles a little bit. But I think one thing I just want to add is, when we're talking about implementing any kind of technology, I think it can be overwhelming at times. And if you try to boil the ocean, you're not going to be able to do it. And so I had to embrace years ago. There is no shame in starting small and being scrappy and trying something out. No matter how small that is, you can get really valuable feedback on what works and what doesn't work. And so you can fail small and learn a ton and then go big. And so I think everything that we do today at Hertz started very small and has grown from there. And there's so many things we're doing today that are little steps that I know a year, 2 years from now will be, company-wide global initiatives. And I think that's can often, as any kind of professional, kind of hold us back if we are overwhelmed with all of the possibilities. It's like pick one, just take one and run with it and start small and then go from there.
Absolutely. I've just made a note of that. Fail small, learn a ton, go big.
Yeah.
You should just trademark that, Emily. Right. So there's a quick time check. So we are coming to the top of the hour. So we will open up for a Q&A if it's okay with the panelists. So I would request the attendees, if you want to ask any questions and, you know, or share any thoughts or anything, please feel free to type in your comments in the chat box. We'll take turns and answer to your questions, or if you want to go deep in any particular aspect that Geoffrey and Emily just mentioned. So yeah, please feel free to go ahead and type in. And we really appreciate the attendees who have stayed back for this. I mean, if you have made it for the 45 minutes of the discussion, I think that's a great achievement. So thank you very much, everyone, for staying back. Yeah, so there's a question from the audience, and Emily, of course, this is organizational information. So if in case you're comfortable in answering, you can answer that, or else we can skip this. So are you training your own model or directly using something like OpenAI or Claude and topping them up with the knowledge of the org?
So we are actually using Microsoft and training it. It's obviously a closed um, technology, and so protects all of our proprietary information. But we are building off of an off-the-shelf product.
Thank you. There's another question, and And in case Geoffrey or Emily, you want to answer this or share your thoughts on this, please do that, or else I'll kind of share my thoughts. So the question is, I'm wondering how the AI agent is integrated with your regular LMS and what challenges came up in the integration process.
I can speak to our end. So it is integrated with our LMS, and I'm trying to think what our biggest challenges were with that. And I think ultimately, just the size of our content library globally presents a challenge in itself, and making sure that all of the content that we had, whether it's homegrown content created by our instructional designers or LinkedIn Learning content or whatever other provider, that we have it categorized and organized in a way that the AI can pull effectively and make sure they're getting the appropriate course. And I will say that in itself historically was a huge challenge, is just managing a content library of that size. And I think so AI has not only helped in kind of connecting the content with the need, it's also helped us organize the content in a way that has made keeping it, maintaining it, and keeping it up to date much easier and less manual.
Right. Thank you. I would agree to that, what you said, Emily. I think the key challenge is, like, what is the quantum of the content that we have? And then, it can take some time, or continuous learning to train the model. It can take some time. When it purely comes to integration, I think the AI agent is something which the organization would own. So you have control on that, and you can configure it in the way that you want, and integrate it in the way. When it comes to integrating with standard LMSs, most of the standard LMSs would have public APIs open, which is a prerequisite for the integration. So that's also possible. And just going one step ahead, not the AI agents are now not only getting integrated within learning management system. In fact, at Harbinger, we have started integrating AI agents or AI virtual coaches into the e-learning course itself. So while you are doing a course, if you want some more insight, some more information, you can interact with that chatbot as well. I mean, I don't want to kind of oversimplify it by saying that it's as simple as integrating an AI chatbot into your website. It's the only difference is this AI chatbot is pretty much smarter than the out-of-the-box chatbots, and is trained and is focused on your organization's content and learning goals. So there's another question. And Geoffrey, if you want to take a shot at this, please, or else I can also share my thoughts. So the question is, how are you showing positive ROI on the investments into AI innovation and creating buy-in to continue to fund and invest? What are you measuring?
Yeah. So a couple things there. I mean, I think, this is one of those areas, like if we're talking about workforce development, or if we're talking about learning and development, if you're implementing an AI solution and it's tied to a specific objective, find the opportunity to tie it to a business objective, so that as you're measuring it, whether you do it by quarter, calendar, or fiscal year, you're actually getting better measurement around the impact. I think this is where, L&D historically has been too humble. We talk about how many people took a course, completed it, graduated. We don't actually talk about how that course or that experience contributed to better, positive financial outcomes or execution of a specific strategic objective. I think this is where you have an opportunity to highlight that. For example, did that AI solution create more efficiencies that allowed you to better leverage 25 FTEs, and because of those 25 FTEs getting better leveraged, you did this, this, and this. I think about it in healthcare, right? We could measure, particularly, does it increase our patient satisfaction? Does it improve our staff engagement scores? Does it potentially reduce our expenses in certain areas like pharmacy, certain areas like lab? areas that are, very, very costly, but because of different leveraging of AI and bringing education in, it could create more efficiencies, better resource management, those types of approaches. Does it allow us to actually, uh, you know, create a better process where we're spending less time in a computer tool to do all the different work that's associated? Like, you can easily find those types of things, but the biggest piece that I would say is tie it to a business objective. Do not just focus on what it did for you from a learning perspective. Tie it to that strategic objective, because then when it comes to invest and further investment, it's so much easier to get the CFO to say, instead of be a CFO of no, for them to actually be like, oh my gosh, look what that accomplished.
Yeah, and
Thank
if I
you.
can, I want to piggyback on that because you're speaking my language, and we built into our intake process. So the beginning of any process, any project that we work on, those are some of the first conversations we have. Like, what are we trying to accomplish with this training? And so maybe it's, decrease in safety incidents in a certain area. And there's a financial cost to that. Or we want to increase NPS, so our customer experience scores. And we know that that is tied to customer loyalty and retention, and you can assign a dollar amount to that. So I think to Geoffrey's point, there's no one answer for ROI, but it's based on what you're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to drive with the training. And then you can identify the metrics that are tied to that and the financial impact behind that. And I think that's so important, regardless of if you're doing it with AI, to be able to get buy-in from the CFO on investing in L&D. You have to show real concrete metrics.
Thank you. Thank you, Geoffrey, Emily. I mean, this topic is in itself is very interesting, and it can take hours to have a conversation on this. But yeah, I think you heard it, like, tie it to the strategic objectives, get a buy-in, and I think we have been too much humble. So claim your credits. Like, whatever courses or L&D is doing, there's a business impact to it. We just have to figure out a way to capture that data and represent. I know we are on the top of the hour, so we'll just kind of summarize it by, in terms of some of our key takeaways. I think all of us agree that frontline workforce development is not optional, it's essential. And AI is already delivering measurable ROI in healthcare and transportation. Trust, communication, and upskilling are critical to successful AI adoption, some of the points that Geoffrey and Emily both alluded to. And a structured framework can help organizations scale their efforts effectively. I think, remember what Emily said, fail small, learn a ton, and go big. So there's no secret sauce as to what the starting point is. I don't have all the building blocks together. How do I get this? Do I need to get AI scientists to implement this? No. I mean, you can always start small and scale up from there. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the attendees who had joined us for this conversation and made this an interactive session with your questions and thoughts and your experiences. And I would also like to thank Emily and Geoffrey for taking time out from their busy work schedules and having this conversation, sharing their experiences with the L&D community. Thank you so very much. This Power Hour was presented by Harbinger. A little bit about the organization. Harbinger Group was founded in the year 1990. We're a little over 850 plus Harbingers. We specialize in providing e-learning design and development services and product engineering services to various industries, which includes human resources, enterprises, e-learning. And over a period of these 3+ decades, we would have serviced 400+ customers in the North America geography, and we would have developed 500+ products for our customers. We also take great pride in saying that, we are big on gender diversity, equity, and inclusivity. And as a testimony to that fact, 43% of our workforce is represented by women. And in the executive team, the women representation is 35%. And with that, again, I thank Emily and Geoffrey once again. Thank you so much for taking the time out for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you all as well.
Right. Thank you. So we'll end this session. Thank you so very much, everyone.